All right, so we're back for quarantine conversations number two, and I am with my friend Diego Domingues. How you doing?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm doing good. Diego lives in Portugal now.
Yep.
Um, how are things in Portugal with the coronavirus and everything?
Well, everyone is at home.
Right. Yeah, that's why I call this little series quarantine conversations. It's kind of the same here. But hopefully things will start getting better and you know, we'll move
Yeah,
along.
yeah,
So
but I heard about the vaccine and it will be ready until a year or so.
yeah, I heard that too. Well, hopefully they can get some remedies in the meantime that can help slow the spread and uh, help things along a little quicker. We have some governments that are not helping and some people that are not helping, but that's another topic.
Yeah,
Um, so the theme of this is going to be the hypothesis of a modern spiritual crisis.
yeah.
Okay. So, Diego, do you want to kind of like let us know what you mean by that? Like what the hypothesis is that we have a spiritual crisis?
Yes, I want to give you some background
Okay.
about the idea. Uh, as you say, I'm currently living in Portugal, and
Right.
I'm living here since 2018.
Okay.
But I was born in Venezuela,
Right.
and as you know, Venezuela is right now in a dictatorship.
Right.
But I grew up there, and it was a democracy, and I saw how it slowly degraded into a dictatorship and a humanitarian crisis. Uh, that process of disintegration led me curious about how democracy works and its origins. That's
Yeah.
how I learned about the Enlightenment, secularism, and humanism.
Okay.
But for me, the forces that conduced my country into its current situation have to be with precisely that modern spiritual crisis, expressed in two things: the lack of social cohesion and the growing economic inequality. So that for me uh, is like a product also of the Enlightenment values,
Okay.
because the Enlightenment and liberal classic liberalism
Right.
favors unrestricted markets, and those kind of markets can become with time a little uh, unequal to people, and with time those inequalities began to reflect in politics,
Hmm.
and well, that's the basic idea. I think the
Okay.
problem is like growing up and beginning to be a major problem, and
So you would
I see that my country maybe is not the only one which is in danger
okay.
from this kind of thing.
So you would say that the two main factors that are kind of negative side effects of the Enlightenment are the lack of social cohesion and inequality. Is that pretty
Yes,
much okay? All
yes.
right. So I took a lot of notes for this conversation. I'm going to try to not be reading a whole bunch, and just be reading down on my notes because I took a lot of notes. Um, but why don't we try to address those first, and try to respond to them and kind of like unpack them. Um,
Okay.
so I know you just started the book Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker.
Yes.
Um, and I got that book a couple of years ago, and I met Steven Pinker at the Atlanta History Center, and I actually just got through speaking with him by email actually a couple of days
Mhm.
ago, and I love his work. It's extremely, extremely inspiring. In fact, to me, it gives me a positive worldview based on evidence that's backed up by evidence. That's the alternative to kind of the religious, perspective. there's something that's not just critiquing religion and saying, pointing out the defects of religion as a positive alternative. And to me, it's very inspiring. So I know you just started reading it. I think the book opens, Pinker talks about a student asked him, like, why should I live?
Yeah.
And Pinker said, well, here's what I remember telling the student. In the very act of asking the question, you're looking for reasons, right? So there are so many reasons to live. You can flourish. You're a human being. You can flourish. There's love, there's sex, there's adventure, human progress, learning. There's all these reasons, and reason is kind of the um, foundation, kind of the Enlightenment, right? Along with
Yeah.
humanism, science, and progress. So you can't reason that there's no reason, right? That
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just
Right.
ridiculous. And reason is the thing that lets you detect past errors in reason, right? That's how we do anything. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
the Enlightenment thinkers too, and Pinker points this out. They were not saying like we're all perfectly like Mr. Spock, perfectly logical, but the fact that we're not, that we're led by all these delusions and whatnot, makes reason that much more important. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. So back to the two things you mentioned. Inequality. Pinker points out in Enlightenment now that this is not necessarily a bad thing because everybody can't be equal, right? The
Hmm.
thing you want to measure it by is if you have prosperity for yourself, because there's always going to be people that have more than you. You know what I mean? Just that kind of just happens naturally. So Pinker points out that's not really the metric you want to use, right? So what you want to use is just your overall excuse me, your overall uh well-being, right? You can't always measure it against somebody else. There's always going to be people that have more than you.
Yes,
Do
but
you
the
get
thing
that?
is that how you measure well-being,
What do you mean?
and how do you measure well-being?
Okay, well, going back to Pinker, this is very much centered on Pinker's work. Kind of this hypothesis. It's kind of like a counter to it, kind of. Um, so Pinker asked, "What is progress?" You know, how
Hmm.
how can we even say there's been progress? Because we have all these cultures and religions and things like that. So how can we say there's been progress? And he points out most people prefer to be happy than depressed, free than oppressed, uh, healthy than sick, alive than dead, and all these things, right? And they've all
Yeah.
improved objectively. The data shows it massively, and so all these are prerequisites to anything else. And Pinker points out, like after World War II, um, the world was in shambles from that atrocity, and they wanted to come together with the UN, right? And
Hmm.
so they were trying to formulate the 1948 UN Declaration of Human Rights. And so how can all these different countries come together and have common interests? Like you say, okay, all our country, everybody's going to say under Jesus Christ. We're all dedicated to Jesus Christ, and that's how we're going to build our values. You can't do that, right? You need Enlightenment humanism. You need secular humanism. The common, uh, those common things, human rights. Everybody has the right to life and liberty. All these, even non-Western countries, they agree to it. It wasn't just a Western thing. So, um, that's narrowing in on our common humanity. That's that's what he's talking about, and all these things, and social cohesion. Okay, so there might be some lack of social cohesion in certain aspects,
I think
but
that
the thing is though,
excuse me.
sorry, the thing is we do share one planet, right?
Yeah.
People used to kind of live on like many worlds on the planet, right? And there was a lot of ignorance because of that. But we man, we do live on one planet, you know, and there cosmopolitanism. So we can't solve so many problems with parochial isolationist policies, right? Like global warming, nuclear threats, an asteroid threat, something like that. So, we have to work together. We all share the same little ball, spaceship Earth, going through space. And if we don't work together, that's going to be a problem. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know.
So, I
But
mean, there might be drawbacks. You can find drawbacks to any technology that's greatly benefited humanity, and you can find drawbacks perhaps to the prevailing philosophical and political ideals and institutions. But that doesn't mean that they haven't benefited humanity objectively, overall. Because I don't think you can deny that. Would you
yeah,
deny that? Democracy,
no, no,
freedom. Okay,
absolutely not. I
okay.
think
All right. Well, go
you
ahead
and
and jump
I,
in, Diego. I've been kind of going off on these two kind of key things that you mentioned. Go ahead if you have any additional comments on that.
that you and I share most of our values.
Right.
But what I mean by social cohesion is, for example, uh, when secularism and the Enlightenment make an emphasis in the individual, and they say that the individual and only the individual
Right.
can define his life and his values,
Right.
and that's good on a side for people because you as a human being can define your own life and your values and all that thing, and there is no one who will impose it to you.
Right.
But that also leads to some kind of isolation and uh, feeling of
Also,
being
because
feeling
see,
of being
when I hear you say, like, you're right, the Enlightenment was about the individual. Um, but isn't that a good thing? Because individuals can suffer and individuals can flourish. An abstract idea can't. An imagined thing that people agree on, a nation can't really suffer. People suffer. People can flourish. Um, so basically, the alternative to individualism is something like blood and soil, right? And that's kind of a romantic idea, romanticism, which was kind of a reaction to the Enlightenment. And
yeah.
and it was all about a certain race or a certain nation has a tie to the soil, and they have a special like destiny, and they're better than everybody else. And this is where we get all kinds of like nasty nationalism and things like that. Like Nazism comes from that. So
Well,
I don't think you want the alternative, right? I mean,
I
you see what I'm
think
saying?
that you're talking about nationalism and that
Well,
streams ideas.
it's not just nationalism. It feeds into tribalism, which we deal with as part of our bad side of
Y-
our nature, basically, the lesser
Yeah,
angels of our nature. And,
but
and the blood and soil thing is really not a good prescription, and it's kind of demonstrably that not a good way to go. You can read history and kind of figure that out.
yeah, but precisely you see how that kind of ideologies, extreme nationalism and populism, are like emerging uh, at these times, and I
I
see
do.
that like a reaction.
But
Um,
the thing is, not every problem is a crisis. Um, so we have a lot of people now that are like, you know, I don't trust experts now because some expert was wrong. But do you know how bad of an argument that is? Because, okay, so you're gonna go like you're not gonna trust your trained pilot when you get on a plane. You're not gonna trust a trained doctor to do surgery on your mom because some expert was wrong. That's kind of an absurd argument, right? And the institutions of democracy, they made the world better. Human rights, they made everything better, but they're not perfect. So, oh, let's go destroy them and go back into the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages or the state of nature and anarchy. That's not the alternative.
Yeah.
I think the way to go would be just to keep improving, to making improvements, incremental improvements. Somebody, I can't remember the author, they coined it protopia. Utopia is a bad idea because people are never going to be perfect, and it'd be dangerous, and it has been dangerous to seek a utopia. But we can keep improving, right? We have.
Hmm.
When you imply that enlightenment idea of applying knowledge and empathy or sympathy to improving the human condition, it works. It has worked. So
Hmm.
you don't want to smash. I mean, it's really, it can really seem heroic or appealing to say, oh, let's smash the machine and tear down everything, but not really. What do you think about it? What's
Is
your
what
your thoughts on that?
is what they try to do in my country, and they
Well,
tear it apart.
yes. So do you think Venezuela is based on the Enlightenment?
What?
You think
Excuse.
Venezuela is based on the Enlightenment, the political system?
No, no.
Okay.
But you
So
know,
how does that apply? You see what I'm saying?
Venezuela previously,
They what?
before the dictatorship, Venezuela was one of the most prosperous country in South America,
Right.
and in the midst of a s- of a that epoch when South America was filled of dictatorships. Venezuela was one of the few democracies that was still functional.
Right.
Um, well, democracy is based on the values of the Enlightenment.
Right.
But
Well,
uh,
democracy is not perfect. I mean, like in classical Athens, they had kind of a direct democracy. The women were not enfranchised; they didn't have the vote, and they had slavery in ancient Greece.
yeah,
It was kind of like a mob rule kind of thing. So a mob rule is not necessarily better than a single tyrant, right? You want to have something like a republic that protects minorities, things like that. That's the kind of democracy you want to have, right? And that's come from the Enlightenment, that kind of refined democracy.
mhm.
So, but and you were mentioning democracy. Democracies used to not exist at all, and now I believe that the majority of countries are democracies.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. I think we have a tendency to be more democratic in the future, but I'm also being alarmed by those kind of things like dictatorships emerging and populism, and I think that there is a cause in there,
There very well could be.
and I
Um,
think that the drawbacks that you are talking about uh, could be solved with things like what we are doing right now. I think that the social cohesion thing is maybe solvable
what do you
by
think is needed for social cohesion? What
more
is required to
contact,
have more of that?
more contact with people, more things like these conversations,
I agree.
uh,
Do you think that
speaking
do you think
speaking
that
about
somebody
values, morals, speaking
yes.
about what will be the good life, for
But what you're
example.
but what you're saying though is an enlightenment ideal that we should all that we expand our circle of empathy
Yep.
and with technology, with cosmopolitanism, with the mixing of people and ideas, you and free trade, being trading, and people are more valuable alive than dead. Reading books by other people, fiction that kind of like puts you in other people's shoes, right? The interchangeability of perspective. I mean, these are the kind of things that have led to the decline of violence and the improvement of every measure of well-being, right? So these are all enlightenment themes and ideas. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So my only thing would be like, because if you said that cohesion means we have to be the same race or the same religion or
No,
the same
no, no.
country, I'm all for cohesion if it's a global community, right? That's
Yes,
that's what we have to be. That's what I mean. We don't have a choice even if you don't like it, because that's what we are. We're all interconnected anyway as social species, right? And via technology, we're all connected. Period. And we have to work together, or we'll die together. That's
uh, and we have to
we want to
use
get we
tech.
want to get to the future shown by Star Trek. How are we going to get there? Through the Enlightenment, through humanism, science, progress. You know, the themes that Pinker talks about that have gotten us to where we're at now. So, Diego, what concerns you about big existential threats right now in the modern world? Do you think like we have bigger threats now than ever? Like
Uh,
like people are worried about nuclear weapons, for example. And some people say, "Oh, science brought us a way to for us to kill each other, to wipe out civilization with nuclear weapons." Um, what do you think about that?
well, I think that nuclear weapons are not a major threat right now because, uh, I don't know if you know the theory of secure mutual destruction.
Right.
Uh,
Mutually assured.
Nowadays, if a country use a nuclear weapon, it's for sure that it will destroy it.
Right.
So
That's
it's not like a
not like
viable
yeah, I
form
agree.
of war. I
And
see climate change like more dangerous.
yeah,
I see populism as more dangerous, and I see growing economic inequality as more dangerous.
yeah. Well, we definitely don't want too much power and authority and money in the hands of too few because that's a recipe for bad stuff, right?
Yeah,
But again, I think there is a point to be made that just because somebody has more than you, things are naturally not going to be equal unless somebody forces them to be equal and everybody's the same. So that's a tricky one, I think.
yeah. I think that people is not to be equal, you know, but to have
Equal opportunity, yes,
equal
but
opportunity. Exactly.
yeah, I agree.
A basic uh, status, a basic means of survival,
Yes,
but extreme conditions of poverty, and that's unacceptable. Meanwhile, there are people who have many
yeah,
yachts and mansions,
yeah. As I
and
said, we have
that cause people to feel resentment.
yeah. When you have like 1% of the world having more than the bottom 50%, that's not gonna go well. That's not good. I agree. Um, but something like how I would answer that, an asteroid could have always wiped us out, right? Forget a nuclear weapon, an asteroid could have it did wipe us out. It wiped out the dinosaurs. There's
Yep.
been like five mass extinctions in the history of the Earth. The Permian, the one 65 million years ago with the dinosaurs. Um, and isn't it cool science how they figured all that out? And they saw like the little line where the asteroid hit, and they dated that, and they found it near the Gulf of Mexico. That's really cool.
Mhm.
Anyway, but yeah, now we have the ability to fight an asteroid if it comes with different methods. Uh, and we have the ability to learn from history and to realize if somebody uses a nuke, you might be next. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
goes back to like human rights. You want to protect human rights for other people because if you don't, somebody can take your rights. If you take the rights from that group, your group could be next. So, Obama made a great speech in 2016, I think, and you'll find it in Pinker's book. If you were going to choose to be born in any time in history, and you didn't know beforehand if you what race you would be, what gender or anything, you'd want to be born now, right? Because more people are treated much better now than ever before in history. So that's a good litmus test right there.
Yeah,
Um,
that's like the John Rawls theory
what's that?
of the veil of ignorance. Do you know it?
The veil of ignorance. Why don't you elaborate on that? I've heard it.
John Rawls
Yes.
made that theory about the veil of ignorance, and he talks about what you're saying.
Okay.
If you
Yes,
don't
yes,
know
yes, yes, yes. Now
the
it's clicking the
conditions
veil of
in which
interest.
you will be
Right,
born, and that.
right. Absolutely. When we talk about happiness, this is in Pinker's book and other books too. There's a book called Abundance, a book called The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley and many others. Happiness is higher now, and I would think it should be, right? Because before, you lived in some village and like some, marauding warlords could ride over the hill and they could burn your village down and take your wife and kid and kill everybody. And it happened all the time, you know. So I think people should be happier now. And there is a meta study by Adrian White from Lancaster University that shows that this is the case also. You mentioned to me on our one of our talks about this suicide and
Yeah,
anxiety. Okay, suicide has existed forever, right? And people used to live like in lonely like farmhouses and they were bored all day. They had much less opportunity and entertainment and any kind of avenue for fulfillment in any way. So the idea that there's an epidemic of suicides is not backed up by the data. And you know what the happiest countries in the world are and the healthiest? Secular democracies, countries that are not religious at all, and that have safety nets, things like that, like Scandinavia, uh, most of Western Europe, Japan. So people that say you need religion, to be fulfilled or happy, nah, the data doesn't back that up either. So but all right. One way to sum up what we were talking about the Enlightenment is our ancestors replaced dogma, tradition, and authority with reason, debate, and institutions of truth seeking. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's okay to keep tradition, if it works and it's not harmful. That's cool. Because even the first big arch conservative Edmund Burke, who kind of debated with Thomas Paine over his rights of man, he talked about, we have the traditions we have because they work, because they withstood the test of time. There's some validity to that, but a lot of things like slavery have withstood the test of time for all of human history up until the last 200 years, and misogyny and women being treated as, baby machines and servants, uh, doesn't mean it's a good thing or a beneficial thing. You know, I think it's better if half the human population are contributing uh, their talents and efforts to humanity.
yeah.
And in every place where women have been emancipated, um, we have less crime and poverty and more opportunity. It's just better all around. It's kind of like almost a cure for poverty. Uh, so
And how do you make that those institutions maintain their functionality without being corrupted by economic power?
checks and balances. That's a simple answer. Um, People are not perfect. I think James Madison said, if people were angels, we would not need government, right?
Yeah.
So, but checks and balances. Everybody has to be held accountable. So, I mean, that's a
Do you
simple
think
answer.
that the checks and balances system in your country is working right now?
Overall, yeah, my country's not perfect at all. I mean, we've got a guy in the White House who is like a barbarian with a cell phone, and he doesn't care. An interesting thought has never come from his lips. He's not exactly somebody who you look at and think, oh man, he really cares about the suffering of mankind, and he really is curious about how the world works and understands science. No, but those are downsides to something like democracy. And I said from the start there are downsides, right?
Yeah.
So, but the alternative is a much worse, you know. Or if you have another alternative, maybe you could present it.
No, I don't have. I'm
Okay.
in favor. I mean,
I didn't
I'm
know.
in favor of democracy, man.
Okay.
But I'm here like exposing what for me, in my experience, will be the dangers. Uh,
Sure. And like
for
Pinker likes to say, look, I'm not like saying like all this like I'm an optimist. I'm showing you the data and telling you things have worked and this is why, and we need to recognize it if we want to build on it. You know, so but things don't have to be perfect. So like I'm a big fan of ancient Greece. That's the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, science, theater, but it wasn't perfect. Socrates thought he had a demon talking to him and stuff, right? And he didn't care about the physical world. He only cared about like ethical questions, like the Thief-Row dilemma. Um, but I have Greek architecture, like Greek columns in my house, because I like what it represents overall. I have a little picture of a painting of the death of Socrates in my house because of what it represents. It represents always the importance of always seeking and questioning
yeah,
truth. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Now the difference with like a religious person who says like, Jesus means this to me. Well, the thing is, you're saying people that don't believe in him go to hell, or a lot of people are, and your book is definitely. So it's quite a different thing. But we can interpret and take the best of things that are like, culture, right? Philosophy. Religion is different because it gives you like these edicts and it makes proclamations about the world that are in conflict with other proclamations and with science and with good sense and logic. So that's different. And I know, Diego, you told me before you were a pantheist, right? Is that right?
well, I don't. I define myself like more as a post-theist, you know,
A
because
post-theist?
yes,
Can you elaborate on that for me?
well, because I believe that we are right now in a post-religion age.
I wish.
Um, I feel that many people which identify themselves like religious don't really feel it, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, we are very much in a secular culture right now.
yeah.
Um, and
How
for
is it in
myself, I
Portugal?
feel
How is it in
but
Portugal with like the religious makeup? Because now, like all the studies that I look at, I never like see much mentioned about Portugal.
Portugal
If
is a
you have an
very
idea,
Portugal is a country with a lot of influence by the Catholic Church. It's a
right,
very Catholic country,
right,
but it's a secular country. You have here a democratic system, and for example, gay people can marry, gay people can adopt children, and that kind of things.
well, that's good. Don't you think that's good?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, great. Yeah, yeah. I just so that's good to know. I like I said, I like to study up on things that I don't hear very much about Portugal. So why don't we talk about some literary figures that we mentioned before and conversations. Dostoevsky, you mentioned him.
Yeah,
Okay. So he famously observed that if God does not exist, everything is permitted, right? I think
right.
that's backwards. I think that basically everything is permitted if a God commands it. Because if the person that believes God is on their side and God commanded it, everything is justifiable, right? And we've seen that through history, people that think they have God on their side. And nobody can demonstrate God's talk to them. So it's, we have all these conflicting God commands and they all kill each other. And you know
You
what I
know,
mean? So,
Dostoevsky was a complex person, and
yeah,
you have to see that when he talks about God, he's also talking about morality and values. You know, he's
right.
not
Like,
talking
yeah, that was
about
about
that.
morality. That quote from him.
Yes,
I
yes,
think he was
yes.
wrong. Um, so if I can read a note that I kind of like formulated based off that.
Okay.
So we're constrained by our physical nature. We're physical beings in a physical universe. We're constrained by our common humanity, our nature as interconnected social beings, the lessons of history, factual data about the world and ourselves. But some phantom god and differing ones disconnect you from all that, and you become a minion for a phantom, and it gives you a license to dismiss and demonize beyond all conversation non-adherence uh, to an invisible authority that you cannot rationally justify to them. Did you catch all that?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just think it's very fallacious. But
That
I think
quote,
it's a
that
thing you
quote
hear
is
very commonly.
from whom?
What's that?
That quote was from whom?
That was from me. That was just a note I
Ah,
wrote
okay,
down.
okay, 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 okay.
See, I wrote down the quote from Dostoevsky, and then I just kind of wrote down some notes about it.
Mhm.
Um, Anything else you want to mention about Dostoevsky that you find interesting?
He's very interesting. I actually read one novel from him, which is called Crime and Punishment,
Right,
and
that's a big one.
it is about a man in which it is about a man that have every reason to kill another human being, you know. And
Right,
Dostoevsky present the the character of that person, and he makes sure that he rationally have every reason to kill that person,
hmm
and he makes that.
I
But
wrote down I wrote down
ha-
another go ahead.
after that killing, that person began to feel bad, you know.
Right.
And the novel is a little bit about that spiritual discomfort uh, that he felt because he had every reason to kill that person,
Right.
but he in his soul knew that he was doing a bad thing, you know.
Right.
That's the novel about.
Okay. Well, another note I wrote down, and somebody asked me to do this before. So is there a purely logical case for compassion and helping the least fortunate? What do you think?
A logical case.
A purely logical case for compassion and helping the least fortunate. I'm gonna give you my response. I just want to see if what you think about that.
Okay.
Want me to go ahead?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, a world where we do not help the unfortunate goes against our evolved psychology as social animals. Further, if one group is treated poorly, your group could be next. Further, great benefits to society and by extension you can be cultivated by cultivating talent that otherwise wouldn't be from among the unfortunate. That kind of world will be less stable and undesirable. Oppressed groups also eventually cause chaos and fight back. We are empathetic, social creatures and are entirely interconnected and interdependent, sharing a common home interest and humanity, all of which is separate from and devoid of, more basic than, and requires no unsupported dogma or claims about the world. Um, it's a perspective that is true regardless of the situation or facts of the greater, wider universe beyond our pale blue dot. A rational, objective assessment of things, including recognizing that some places and ideas are more healthy and successful than others, some individuals possess abilities others do not, must take into account these unifying facts. Our only protection is from other humans who we can trust. The same traits that will create trust personally can be applied to a healthy, reliable, functioning culture and society and community of societies generally. A destructive, untrustworthy, duplicitous, uncaring society or person is not beneficial. I know that was very long, but
Yeah.
basically, there are a lot of logical reasons why you should treat people good. Pull it down. So Diego, Nietzsche, what do you think about Nietzsche?
Well, Nietzsche um, was the was recognized by was recognized for talking about the modern spiritual crisis when he said that God had uh, that God died, basically.
Right.
I don't know if you know about that.
I do. I know about him. I can't really. I've got a big book on Nietzsche, and I've got about halfway through it. It's really hard to read. It's in English, of course, but it's still really hard to read. So basically, my idea about Nietzsche is, I think a certain conception of his Overman, Superman
Mm.
is interesting if you interpret it in a certain way. So, like, if you say there are great people who have the potential to lift humanity up and transcend human frailties, I think that that's right. I think there are people that are special. You know what I mean? And it's kind of an admirable goal to transcend our frailties, right? But it depends on how, again, it depends on how you look at it. If you want to abandon the fact that we're social beings and you want to do what Nietzsche recommended, Nietzsche's will to power, he said, I don't care about the common man. The common man are trash. The great men should come wield their power and take over the common man. I don't agree with that. There was
Yeah,
Nietzsche was very belligerent and warlike. He glorified war like a lot of people did back then. Um, I don't agree with any of that, and I think Walter Kaufman, who was a key translator of his in English, he makes the argument that Nietzsche said a lot of things that he didn't really believe, but he was just like a really out there thinker that wanted to challenge people all the time, like challenge common ideas. And if you look at Nietzsche like that, then he appears in a better light than if you actually take him for what he says. Another thing about Nietzsche, what you said about the death of God, I don't agree with him that basically all morality was tied to God and religion, and so now we're in a crisis because God's dead and the idea of God is dead and people don't believe it, and so now we need a radically new moral concept, and I think that's complete crap, because I think again humans are a social species and we're interconnected and interdependent, and that's a basic biological fact, and we have empathy as part of our nature.
yeah.
So,
But look, what I think that he meant is like we need like a substitution for what had been lost, you know, after the Enlightenment,
yeah, but see, that's my
and
point.
that
What had
and
been
and,
lost?
and the answer to that is basically, for example, what Pinker says to the person that asks him in the book about what's the meaning of life, you know,
Right.
and he
But
tells,
if you
yeah,
look at religion, like look at Christianity, um, there's no original ethical tenet from Christianity. There's nothing really original at all from Christianity. A lot of it's good stuff started in Greece, like the Stoics. They had an idea of universal brotherhood in humanity. Paul in the New Testament, he talks about slaves should obey your masters and you should stay in your station in life. Um, and that people are only equal. Everybody can be saved, even a slave can be saved, but only if they worship Jesus, right? Everybody else is still going to burn forever, right? So, not really a humanistic, admirable ideal there. It's a very kind of backward, antiquated,
is from the
divisive.
past. It is,
Yeah.
look, it is
Well, the
done.
people that try to say Christianity, like Nietzsche was trying to say Christianity gave us this morality, but it didn't. It existed before Christianity and even
Yeah,
existed as part of our biological makeup. That's what I'm
yeah.
saying. Um, Also, a lot of the Enlightenment was the rediscovery of pagan ideas, like they were rediscovered in the Renaissance and like atomism, uh, the poem of Lucretius on the nature of things. Atomism that he kind of kept going from Democritus and Epicurus. Um, and even Peter Gay, who was a big Enlightenment scholar, his book The Enlightenment is subtitled "The Rise of Modern Paganism." So he had the idea, that basically people rediscovered old pagan ideas. So Um, that's something to keep in mind. But let's see. Moving on to our topics here, Diego.
Okay.
Um, are you familiar with Joseph Campbell?
Yes,
Yeah, I
a
really
lot.
love his work. Uh, he talked about with his little video series with Bill Moore's The Power of Myth. Um, Basically, Bill Moore was asking him, like, where do you get meaning and stuff from? And he's like, well, why do you have to say everything has to have been created by a person, by an agent? Somebody has to be generating all the energy. He said, why can't the ultimate mystery be impersonal? And then Bill Moore says, can men and women live with an impersonality? And Campbell says, yes, they do all over the place. Just go east. So basically in the east, and this kind of ties back to what I was talking about in my last podcast. People in the east, they developed completely different ideas that gave them consolation and meaning, other than like some kind of tyrant that gives them commands and has a plan for them and stuff like that. And they're gonna die
Yeah,
and go to a paradise forever. So
yeah.
it's more of an impersonality than a personal uh, thing.
But we have to try to not romanticize them, you know?
I
They are
agree. Yeah.
religions. They are religions.
Oh yeah, you can find
And
bad stuff. Yeah, like I said, drawbacks and bad stuff everywhere. No doubt about that. Um, let's see here. Oh, Diego, we've gone a lot longer than my last podcast. We have some interesting things to talk about. What do you think about Spinoza? We've talked about Spinoza before.
uh, I told you so. I love him.
Yeah, I think he's
I
pretty cool
love him.
too. Um,
He's a cool man. And I noticed it because I was reading the Pinker's book, and
he
uh,
has a quote,
in
like
the
first page.
first page,
Yeah, yeah.
there is a quotation by
You want to
Spinoza.
read that quote?
Oh, I
You
don't
have the
have
book?
the book here.
I, God. Yeah. So that quote goes, those who are governed by reason desire nothing for themselves, which they do not also desire for the rest of humankind. Spinoza. That goes back to if you take their rights away, yours could be next. You don't want to live in that kind of world, right?
Yep.
So,
And it's incredible how that person with that little knowledge, because he
yeah,
lived in an age of total darkness,
yep.
he was able to discern many things that was later confirmed.
Oh
That's
yeah.
what I admire most of
He
him.
was an early biblical critic.
Yeah,
He went through the Bible. He noticed how Moses kind of narrates his own death. It's like, how is this Moses talking? He's talking about himself after he died, stuff like that. Um, there's a book, a really great book I recommend, called "A Wicked Company." Enlightenment by Philip Blom. He's a French author. He has a great quote about Spinoza that argues for him as an atheist. I can read it real quick. So many interpreters have made Spinoza out to be a pantheist who sees God's will, love, and providence in every leaf and grass and every dewdrop, but this is a fundamental misunderstanding. As his contemporary followers and enemies immediately understood, Spinoza's God is nothing but a particular way of referring to the laws governing the physical world, the only world. One might praise the absolute perfection of this God, but it is soon revealed that no entity, no creator, no loving or angry father, no God who saves or punishes is designated by the name. There is only impersonal necessity in a material world. There is no one left to pray to. Spinoza has done nothing less than praise God out of existence.
yep. In fact, he used the
So,
term when he wrote the Ethics.
right,
He used the term God or nature.
right. He
When he
he
when he
basically
spoke
saw God
about
as
God,
nature,
when he
more or
spoke
less.
about God, he used the term God or nature,
Right. He so he,
like like if
what's
they
the full
were
quote
both
that you're referring to?
equivalents.
Oh, he thought it was. You're saying he thought it was a false equivalence. He didn't mean by God. He didn't mean nature.
He meant nature.
Okay. Okay. Yep, that's
And
it's very
people,
interesting.
I think that people sometimes confuse him by being pantheist, but Spinoza
Right.
wasn't pantheist for me.
Yeah. So you
He
would
said,
you would also concur that he was basically an atheist.
I don't know, but he wasn't
I know he used
pantheist.
God all the time, but he,
Yes, and he talked about God, but he talked about that presence being immanent in the universe,
right.
but not being the universe itself. And
Okay.
it's a little complex idea. Spinoza is very
It is.
complex. You have to
It is.
read him. Um,
Uh, Steven Pinker's wife. You told me you had her book on Spinoza, and she
yeah,
argues that he's an atheist too. So yeah, it is a complex
he
complex
was for me.
character.
For me, he was a very spiritual person, and for
Yeah.
me, he was very influenced by uh, Jew by mysticism in general and that kind of things.
Yeah.
Uh, we talk about a man with little information, and he was like trying to make sense of the world. And
Yeah. In
well,
a lot of ways, he was a pioneer. He was the first to do a lot of things. And so the way he talks is it's gonna be hard to interpret because he's like really starting a lot of things. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Whole ways of looking at things. So that's definitely true. Diego, was there any other topics you wanted to get to? No, we're already at 51 minutes. So
Mm, uh,
what do you
well,
have any general thoughts about religion? Your thoughts on it?
for me, religion is that, um, but we have to find a way to be more Socratic culturally.
Socratic, right?
We need to talk about what will be a good life, what will be a good society, what are our new standards as a society.
Right.
And enlightenment gave us individuality, but we also have to think about our future as a global civilization.
Agreed. One of the things you were talking about about social cohesion is the first civilizations and the great civilizations were basically um greatest hits collectors. They were aggregators because usually no one person is brilliant enough to come up with a great new idea on their own, right? But when you have a mixing of people and ideas, it's like a big brain. A city becomes like a big brain, right? So you have
Mhm.
all these mixing of ideas and people, and that's the thing that really generates great progress, and where you get like the first civilizations and the great cities, things like that. So, so social cohesion, like as a homogenous, identical group, never really did that
No,
much.
I don't think about homogeneity,
Okay,
but uh, it's more like being uh, not losing the sense of unity with your community. You know,
yes,
that's
but
all.
we need to make humanity our community. We can still have
Exactly.
like you can still even put your country first, right? Because it's your country, but that doesn't mean that you think that criticism of your country is like a blasphemous. It's necessary. You have to criticize things to improve them. Criticizing ideas moves us forward, right? And you have to realize that we're one race and we share one planet. Um, so seeing if there's anything else I wanted to cover with you, Diego. Uh,
What do you think about the political situation in your country? I'm asking for curiosity.
I don't like it. It's concerning, but I don't think that a problem is necessarily a crisis. I don't want to confuse pessimism with profundity. Um, it's very easy to when you only look at the bleeding headlines and you romanticize the past. It's very easy to be pessimistic, right? But Barack Obama came before Trump. You know, when you
Mm.
look at the overall progress, the way I put it in my book, we've gone from cave dwellers to space explorers. There used to be no human rights, and slavery was ubiquitous. Um, so the overall arc is still going in the right direction, and you have to really expect that there's going to be setbacks and some regressions and things because that's kind of human nature. It's kind of like, you take two steps forward, one step back, then
Yeah.
another couple steps forward and one step back. That's kind of how it goes. That's kind of how it's always gone, really. When you look at the overall picture of things. So
Is entropy also playing a role here?
yeah, but I think the overall progress of mankind is something you can call glorious and spiritual, and it's something that includes everybody. Everybody's a part of this story and connected to it. And when I look back on like history and I see people thousands of years ago, they also had joys and they suffered heartbreak over a lover, or they had problems with their government. I mean, all this is a common human story, that we're all kind of a part of. I mean, it's a real story. It's not a myth. It's not symbolic. It's real. It's kind of inspiring and spiritual, and it's even kind of a consolation to mortality in a way because it's bigger than me. It's true that if you're in the entirety of the meaning you get is just from your own individual self, and you don't have any interest or passions that extend beyond you, right? If you don't believe in anything bigger than yourself, then that's going to be pretty lousy, right? You're not going to be very fulfilled. But for me, like if like a religious person says, I believe in a higher power, something bigger than myself. This is from the very end of my book, by the way, A Justified Faith. I don't know if you've ever read it. You can get it on Kindle, Amazon.
Mm.
Uh, the very last line, I say, I believe in a lot of things that are bigger than myself. I believe in humanity, progress, the universe, the huge universe, and who knows what beyond it. It's full of mystery and meaning. Um, the people that are religious that say like, if I didn't have a God, I'd be like looking around in circles for a meaning. Like that's ridiculous. It sounds like a slave saying, I'm not happy unless I have a master." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I don't find it meaningful to live, go to a heaven and be on bended knee praising a monster forever. That's not very meaningful to me.
I
Especially a
think,
monster that sent my loved ones and billions of good people to hell to burn forever. But I guess that's getting into a different discussion. But
I feel
yeah,
that a good replacement for the narrative of heaven and salvation for this age could be the conquest of the universe. That's
conquest of the universe.
inspiring.
It's a big universe.
Yeah.
Um, Adventure awaits. Discovery awaits. There's a great quote from Lawrence Krauss. And by the way, uh, I booked Lawrence Krauss to do one of these podcasts, my little channel. So that's pretty cool. He said he could do it in June, so that's awesome. But a quote of his from his book, I think his latest last book. He basically, to paraphrase him, he said, how sad it would be if the people look at scientific discovery as erasing the greatest story ever told, like the Bible and the past. It's like that's so depressing. You don't want to say that the best stories are in the past. You want to say the best stories are in the future. And
Exactly.
that's what science can do for us. Our whole world is built on the validity and the efficacy of science. And look all that we've done, and who knows what we can do. So
What do you think about Elon Musk?
I don't know. He does some good things. He says some good things. Um, I like that he's investing in space travel, and maybe we'll have like civilian space travel. in the near future. Um, I don't really know if his simulation theory that he believes in. I don't know that I mean, you can't really quite disprove it, but I think he's a little bit too much of a fanboy for simulation theory. You know.
I'm very
Uh,
curious about him because he shared that illusion, that objective of conquering the universe, and he said like the first objective is going to Mars.
mhm.
And when
Well, you know
that
what? Neil deGrasse Tyson points this out. Like, a lot of times you can't like assign science a purpose to say, let's go find this. A lot of times it happens as a byproduct of just pure investigation for investigation's sake. Like, a lot of Einstein's theories, uh, they gave us lasers and electronics and all kinds of things, and we dominate electrons now with electronics. So you can't really set out a goal like that and only fund like a certain thing. You have to let science investigation go for its own sake. That's how we've discovered a lot of things. That's kind of like a byproduct of just people, investigating thing for investigation's sake. So, but I like Elon Musk's spirit.
yeah
You know what I mean? He's looking to
and
the future. And we need people like that. Yeah. So that's my
something
take on
curious, when all this thing about coronavirus began, um, I was looking at the sky and I began to see lights and strange things. And
it. Searching.
when I went to the internet, I discovered that it was Elon Musk because he is launching a series of satellites to space
Really?
in order to make like a net of satellites
Right. That's cool.
around the planet to make internet available to everyone, and
I can get behind that. Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
I think that he made that thinking about Mars, because if you are going to establish a colony in Mars, and you
Right.
need that colony to have access to
Right.
internet and communication, you won't have the resources to buy the infrastructures and cables, and you just need to launch satellites
No.
and make a net of satellites around the planet. And I think he's doing things um, in favor of that objective. For me,
Yeah.
that's his inspiration. And I don't know if you can see the satellites right now. Maybe you can
You're
try.
supposed to be able to see the International Space Station from at least with a telescope. Um, so I don't know.
But they
Have you ever watched on YouTube the live feed from the International Space Station? It's pretty cool.
yes, yes, it's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
But this
definitely.
is amazing, man. You have to see it because
Okay.
they have the capacity of reusing their rockets,
All right.
and each rocket have the capacity to carry around 300 satellites. Imagine
Huh.
that. And they will put around 2,000 satellites in space.
Wow. It's pretty cool.
12,000.
All right. Well, Diego, I guess we've been over an hour. About time to wrap up. Uh, Quarantine Conversations #2. Thank you for being my guest. I'm glad things are going pretty well over there in Portugal. It's at least not closed down like Italy was closed down. And here in the U.S., we're opening back up a little bit. Hopefully, it's not too fast, and we don't have a backtrack. And we have these idiots with guns on state capitals saying, "I know my rights to get other people sick," and people with common sense realize that that's idiotic. But anyway, that is also another topic. But yeah, man, it's been fun. Thanks for joining me. I've had to stay up late. You're like 6 hours ahead of me in Portugal. It's like morning there, and it's like late night here. So yeah, it's been fun, man, and I wish you luck. Are you still like studying over there, or
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
cool, cool. All right, man. Well, it's been fun. All the best. Thanks for joining me.
For you too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.